Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
Thank you very much. The computer textbooks of the 1980s told the readers that the fastest computer in the world must be powered by only one isolated processor. On the 4th of July, 1989, I discovered that the fastest computer in the world must be powered by thousands or millions or even billions of commodity off-the-shelf processors that were tightly coupled to each other, that were identical to each other, and that shared nothing between each other. That discovery made the news headlines and has been embraced by all computer scientists. That discovery is the vital technology that underpins every supercomputer. I'm Philip Emeagwali. To discover is to change the narrative of science. In my quest for the Holy Grail to the fastest supercomputers, I focused on the second law of motion of physics that was discovered 3 centuries earlier, which, however, had existed since the Big Bang explosion that occurred 13.8 billion years ago. Back in the early 1980s, I re-examined textbooks that described how the second law of motion of physics was encoded into a system of coupled, nonlinear, time-dependent, and 3-dimensional partial differential equations of calculus that governs 3-phase flows of crude oil, injected water, and natural gas that were flowing 1 mile deep underneath a production oil field that is the size of a town. During my supercomputer research, I re-examined mathematical physics textbooks that described how the second law of motion of physics was codified from the algebraic equation to the differential equation. What I discovered was an epiphany. I discovered that in its most important application, namely the recovery of crude oil and natural gas from production oil fields, that the second law of motion of physics was incorrectly represented. I discovered that each of the 9 partial differential equations within the system of coupled, nonlinear, time-dependent, and 3-dimensional partial differential equations encoded into petroleum reservoir simulators incorporated only 3 partial derivative terms. Those 3 calculus terms corresponded to 3 physical forces, and none corresponded to the 4th physical force that actually exists in the oil field being simulated. I discovered that those 3 physical forces could not equate to the actual 4 forces inside oil production petroleum reservoirs. My contribution to mathematical knowledge is this: I corrected those mathematical errors, and I corrected them by adding 36 partial derivative terms that corresponded to and accounted for the 36 components of the erroneously missing inertial forces. That was how I invented 9 partial differential equations that are the most advanced equations in mathematics and the most important expressions in calculus. I'm hopeful that the 9 partial differential equations that I contributed to mathematics will remain accurate over the centuries. The Philip Emeagwali system of partial differential equations should remain accurate because they encode the second law of motion of physics that in turn did not change since the Big Bang explosion that is the beginning of time for our universe. As a research computational mathematician in quest for previously unseen partial differential equations, my research perspective was diametrically opposite to that of an applied mathematician that only wants to analyze known partial differential equations. In the 1980s, I attended 500 weekly research seminars, with the first half of those seminars occurring in the metropolitan areas of Washington, District of Columbia, and Baltimore, Maryland. Half of the seminar speakers were research mathematicians that came from faraway places, such as Moscow, Russia, Paris, France, and London, England. During those seminars, I observed that research mathematicians either focused their analysis on known partial differential equations that has been described in calculus textbooks, or they were scribbling partial differential equations that has been scribbled before on a blackboard or coded before into a motherboard. I observed that research mathematicians of the 1970s approached initial boundary value problems from only one direction. That direction was to and from the mathematician's blackboard. The iconic Navier-Stokes equations is the favorite system of partial differential equations of the mathematical physicist. Being a physicist and a mathematician and a supercomputer scientist, I simultaneously approached my parallel processing research on how to solve the most computation-intensive algebraic approximations that arose from finite difference discretizations of partial differential equations and how to solve them from 4 directions. My 4 directions were from the storyboard of the physicist to the blackboard of the mathematician to the motherboard of the computer scientist and across the motherboards of the research supercomputer scientist.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.